Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you for joining for August's webinar. Inshallah, everybody is well. Hopefully everyone can see the screen. So today we've got an interesting topic. We're talking about spouses, and I know a lot of you have asked for that, and it's one of the questions that we get. So inshallah, today's session will be fruitful. As usual, we start by the Quran. The verses which I've got today, just as some for reflection, are really to do with how honest we are with our spouses, what we kind of do in terms of our integrity. So for example, this verse, chapter 24, Surah An-Nisa, talks about those who accuse their own spouses. So this is obviously in terms of cheating. For example, we're looking at, and we know in Islam that normally there's 4 witnesses required, but what this verse says is, and those who accuse their own spouse, وَالَّذِينَ يَرْمُونَ أَزْوَاجَهُمْ, and they have no witnesses, وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُمْ شُهَدَاء, they have no witnesses except إِلَّا أَنفُسَهُمْ, فَشَهَادَةُ أَحَدَهُمْ أَرْبَعُ شَهَادَاتٍ بِاللَّهِ. So one of them has the testimony of one of them is 4 oaths. And this is important because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving importance to the spouses because they know each other. And interestingly, if we look at the statistics as well, I was just looking at statistics today that if a spouse thinks that another spouse is cheating, they're usually correct about 60 to 70% of the time. And that's, with the statistics that we have. And obviously the verse then goes on, and the 5th, وَالْخَامِسَةِ إِنْ لَعْنَةَ اللَّهِ عَلَيْهِ إِنْ كَانَ مِنَ الْكَاذِبِينَ, and the 5th is Allah's curse is if they're a liar. Obviously, if you were lying, if you're not actually truthful when you are accusing your spouse. But it's interesting how the 4 witnesses, which we usually hear, that rule doesn't apply for the spouse, and it highlights the importance of the marital relationship. The other verse, which obviously those of you familiar with the story of Lut alayhi salam, we see this verse in chapter 26. Atatuna zikran, do you approach males, min al-alamin, above all of creation, all realms, are you really approaching males? وَتَذَرُونَ مَا خَلَقَ لَكُمْ, and you're leaving what God created of you, min azwajikum. And this is, I guess, in terms of same-sex attraction, in terms of the topic that we're discussing today, is interesting because sometimes we do, and especially for people who may be married and they may be acting out, is almost as they have left their spouses, and they don't know what's happening. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes this as common adun, people who have transgressed. Transgressed why? Because they already have a spouse, but they choose to act outside of that realm, and they choose to cheat. So again, interesting reflections from the Quran. Hopefully that is useful for today's discussion. I'm just going to go through some of the updates that we have. So alhamdulillah, this month we visited Leeds. We had a closed event with Leeds Muslim Youth Group. And we continue to engage with the local Muslim community around us, around the topic of sexuality or gender identity. There's also an article which I got published on, which I got good feedback from, which was my SSA, Understanding and Healing. And that looks at the Quranic narrative and how we can take practical lessons from the Quran in understanding same-sex attraction. Inshallah, in the coming sessions, we'll be opening up support circles for gender identity support. Before, we have been focused on sexuality or sexual identity, but alhamdulillah, we will be trying to initiate, and obviously we would need people to come for those support circles. So please look out for that. It's really an intention that we're supporting both people who have conflict with sexual and gender identity. We've moved to Calendly, as you may have seen. So if you go to strongsupport.co.uk, you'll see that it's slightly easier to book in either a 30-minute consultation or a coaching call. And that's made our lives and hopefully the lives of other people easy in terms of scheduling. So our next webinars, 2 webinars, inshallah, will be to do on the topic of Islam and gender identity as we look at this topic in a bit more detail. A lot of us ask about what the legislation is, what's happening at the moment. Well, we know that the UK government at the moment is electing a leader. And in that scope, most of the bills in Parliament are suspended. So the bill for this is also suspended at the moment, and we await further clarification on that. There's also the IFTCC conference, which is in Budapest, which is in October. This is invite only. So if you want to be part of that conference, we know we went last year with Sheikh Fadl Suleiman. So if you are interested in that, let us know. There's a deadline for that, which is 25th September. So those are our updates. And now we move on to the main topic for today. So we're very lucky to have Sister Fahima with us. So Sister Fahima graduated with a BSc Hons in business management. She's worked in law as a conveyancer, and then later on she's become a certified life coach, and as well as an NLP practitioner. She's also certified in Mindfulness, Existential, positive psychology, group and facilitation for companies and institutes. She also is quite well known for relationship and couples coaching. She has been certified by the Academy of Modern Applied Psychology for mental health and wellness. She's also certified for CBT. And currently she is pursuing a master's in psychology and neuroscience. So again, mashallah, very well-educated, well-rounded, a unique asset to the Muslim community. Like some of you with a keen eye may have seen that she helped us to bring the topic of SSA on British Muslim TV. And I'm sure Sister Fahima can tell you that that wasn't an easy feat to discuss something like that within the Muslim community. And, you know, she's appeared on numerous TV channels. And, you know, I really like the fact that she does discuss controversial subjects. I remember I was watching an episode on polygamy, and I thought that was so important to discuss in our communities, and how certain things are taboo, whether to do with intimacy, marriage, violence. I think it's just very important that we have that safe space where we can discuss these issues in a non-judgmental way. So she continues to do great work. You can follow her. She's on the social media channels. So if you go to coachfm.com, you can find the social media handles. You can see the coaching that she's doing. I think maybe she's just come from a coaching call as it seems just before this. So she's very busy, but alhamdulillah, whenever I've needed anything, whenever I've asked for help, she's been there. So I can personally vouch for the help and the resourcefulness. So that's coachfm.com. And a variety of things. And what I like is that sometimes we do need an all-rounded individual who can do that, because sometimes you go for niches, sometimes you go for, okay, I need the expert in that, or I need something like that. But some of the issues, like the issue we're discussing today, are everyday challenges. They're everyday challenges for, it may not be that you have SSA, maybe you have another issue and you're struggling with that, and you're saying, how do I address this to my spouse? This is a sensitive topic in the community. So a lot of these things you can access support, which doesn't need to be niche or doesn't need to be specialized. And there's great members in our community which are doing brilliant work in this sector, and we can definitely take use of that. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Sister Fahima. Sister Fahima, thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure to be part of your sort of network, and really appreciate the introduction as well. Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll go right in the topic. Now, we chose this topic. We had a discussion and we said, okay, we have our webinar. What are we going to use it? And I really like Sister Fahima, because she said, okay, what are the main challenges that you're seeing every day? And I was like, one of the most frequently asked questions, whether it's individuals who are looking to get married or people who are already married and they're struggling. Predominantly we have people struggling with sexual identity. We have some people now, as we said, starting to come for gender identity and gender dysphoria as well. And these topics are difficult to talk about, especially in let's start with the pre-marriage stage, when we're trying to get to know each other, and we're almost trying to depict the best version of ourselves to our future spouse. Would you really disclose the struggle with either its sexuality or gender identity? Would you think that would be worth really disclosing to your future spouse?
I think that's a really, really tough question, and it's not that clear cut. And majority of the time, people want answers which they feel other people can give them, even if they go to a professional. But studying what I'm studying so far, and I have not stopped studying in the last 6.5 years for human mind and behavior, obviously, and still continuing with my master's, and just realizing, in the actual sort of like coaching sphere, which is very similar to like the training that I have with regards to, similar to counseling and things like that, and therapy, that I've studied so many different types of therapy, especially even now, that the whole idea of you wanting to be with somebody else is you trying to figure out first who you are. And I do these shows week in and week out for so many years now, and speaking to so many other professionals myself, it's not even about disclosure. It's about, are you comfortable with you? So, and then also understanding your own sort of like ways of responding and reacting to the other person as well. So if you are secure, if you are self-aware, you have to understand, for example, there's a scenario that if you did have those kind of same-sex attraction to whatever extent that is, and you know that you're going to tell that to your potential spouse, I feel that, are you willing to take the risk as well of that person not accepting it? Will you also be, saying, I'm going to be completely honest because this is how I genuinely feel that it has to be disclosed? Are you that type of person to be able to handle that and the outcome? Because a lot of people will get advice not realizing what is it that they can handle, and they can either go into a worse situation. Not to say that you shouldn't be doing these things, that you have to do the inner work. And I think I love the fact that we're talking about premarital first, because a lot of us think that we have to go into a relationship and that's going to solve all of our problems. But as you know, later on, and we're hearing that more and more, that when we get into relationships, that's when all of our past trauma, unhealed wounds, everything is unraveled, and it's so much is reflected upon your relationship. So whether or not, even if it's coming from same sex, imagine even in a sort of, as we could say, normal, even though, nowadays it's normal to even have that kind of same sex attraction. But I'm just saying in sort of the general aspects of issues, it's complicated if you don't know yourself, if you're not confident, if you don't have your values and your core sort of belief set and your foundation really, really strong, then that alone is going to cause you problems, let alone if you're still wondering, whether or not I can be open with this person, right? And you need to sort of like really get into it. It's not about trying to say, should I or shouldn't I? It's you saying to yourself, am I free? Am I going to be walking on eggshells? Does this really bother me? Right? Even some people may not disclose all of their past sexuality sort of activities or whatever it may be, right? And that could be theirs to hold. But then maybe if they were acting upon it, maybe somebody else might say it. So there's so many different scenarios. Or if it was just, something that they felt within themselves, and they said, I'm just going to keep it to myself. If you've shared it with someone else, believe me, it's going to come out. That's how life is. But if you've always kept it within yourself and you feel that you want to hold it within you, you have that right as well. So there's so many different scenarios, I feel.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I don't think we address it. We just come up with answers thinking that it's going to fit all. No, it doesn't. And if you are trained and you are professional, you will never just go into these yes or no sort of, answers. You will understand there are such a selection of, questions you have to ask that individual, which will be the same questions or different questions to somebody else. And the outcome is going to be completely different.
Yeah.
That's the first and foremost. Yeah.
Every situation is unique, as you're saying.
Absolutely.
And, as you rightly said, that people have different capacities. The person who's revealing and the person who's hearing have different capacities in what they can and can't do. And obviously in a situation where, say, you've had sexual activity in the past and it's not going to affect the future, so then you make a decision to say, okay, it's not relevant at this point, and I'm not going to reveal it, and that makes kind of entire sense. So say we put a scenario where you've had these struggles and you've had them for a long time. Maybe you've had them since puberty, or as early as you've known, and you have then tried to approach marriage, and you've almost trying to do the halal, and you're ready for marriage, and you have all the things which are there for marriage, but you're not 100% sure whether that those attractions will come back, or they might not, and it is still something that you struggle with, maybe not daily, but maybe monthly or weekly. It is something that does cross your mind. What about in that scenario? Would you say, would you still say that it depends on the capacity of the individual to disclose?
I think there's different factors to consider there, because if you feel that you're ready for marriage, and just like with any relationship again, are you going to be able to give your whole to the other person? Because that's what's expected, right? It's a two-way scenario. And if you're still struggling with yourself, are you taking steps in order to try and get yourself in a position where you feel strong enough to be, giving your whole to the other person? Because they will sense it over time. And I know that, when people look at me, they can know, obviously I come from faith, but I don't just talk from my faith. I talk and I put myself out there on mainstream or on, platforms, and I have clients from faith and no faith, because I don't just come from faith when I talk about certain things. It is also from science and research and studies, as I am a student right now. And at the end of it, I think it's important that we consider all factors. And what I'm trying to say is that even as professionals, we cannot drive a particular person in a particular way. It has to come from them. We just open up their mind. So if they are going through a process of trying to figure themselves out as to where they are, it's probably a continuous journey. And if they want to keep that personal sort of relationship with their therapist or, a counselor or whoever they're seeing in that particular way to solve it, that should be fine for now. But when you're entering into a relationship, then yeah, that does need some sort of, conversation. Because if you are not fully prepared to give your whole, because if you still have, even if it's, forget the same-sex attraction, just you even being attracted to somebody else, that's not fair generally for any relationship. Do you understand? So it needs to be where, people need to understand that, there's a need in a relationship, whether it's from you or you giving it to somebody else or you receiving it from somebody else. So it's only fair to a certain extent. This is from just a human point of view and knowing how relationships unfold, that if you are going to keep something that big and you haven't dealt with it, are you actually putting yourself in a situation just to get away from, dealing with the factor that, you are running away from the truth? Or you just want to think that, oh, I'm going to go into this relationship that is going to help me overcome my sort of, same-sex attraction, or, and that's not fair either. So, you cannot style these things just to be thinking that, I have to do it because, yeah, even though religion says it, but you have to be genuine, because these things do unfold. I've had clients that have come to me saying that, by the way, everything's private and confidential, but unfortunately there's more than one. So if I say something, it's definitely not you specifically, it's more than one person. And I don't reveal anyone in particular, but these are case studies that reveal that at the very beginning, they've had inclinations, or someone's told them that, my partner was on a dating app just for men. And when they were approached, it was like, oh, it was just a joke. And then years later, after having kids, that's the same reason that they have issues and problems, right? So these are, you could say, red flags that a person is not fully honest with themselves as to how they feel and be, and they need to be honest with themselves and then move forward. But then there's other scenarios where, like, yeah, I'm working on myself. This is definitely something that not the direction that I want to go in, and you're absolutely free to do that. Or if you want to go in whichever direction, again, you're free to do that. In this country, the law is like that. So, at the end of the day, it's really about, again, I feel, is being honest and true with yourself. And you are on a journey. If you feel that you're going to try and, maneuver how you may or may not think in a particular way, but if you're going through those things and you're with a partner, they have a right to know, in order to either support you or even have the choice to say, am I willing to be part of this journey when you're not sure if you are actually attracted to me or not, if you are actually going to give me what I need as well. It's not just about you, right? It's a two-way thing. A relationship is two ways. So just from a human point of view, I think that, that particular case, what you've just highlighted, then again, you need to speak to somebody who is professional to unravel at what stage you're at. And then if other people are involved, like a potential spouse, then they at some point do need to have some sort of, conversation with you and be aware of your situation right now. Just like if you're going through addiction, just like if you're going through any sort of, trauma, You can't hold that back for so long and go into a relationship pretending everything's okay. It's just not fair for you, for them, for the relationship as a whole.
I really like what you said about you need to be honest with yourselves before you're honest with somebody else, because for a lot of us, even in our own personal work, it took us a long time to be honest with ourselves and say, oh, I really have this. I need to own up to this and say, I do struggle with it. So it's definitely a case of where we are on our journeys with our own self, and then how comfortable we are addressing it to ourselves, and then kind of addressing it to others. So we've talked before marriage. So say this person, for a scenario, hasn't told their spouse, right? And now they've entered the relationship, and and for a lot of people, the first year of the relationship or the first few months can be difficult as they get to know each other, and they at this point are struggling with their identity, and perhaps they are seeking support. Perhaps they have the professional support on the side as well. Would you say that it's still up to them at that point as well, where they are on the journey, to disclose what's happening to their spouse? And I guess you may see that in your clients as well, that they're going through something that maybe their spouse isn't aware of.
Well, like you said before, a lot of the times when there's an inclination, the other person can sense it. And if one partner is going through something, even if you're talking to a professional privately and you haven't shared it with your spouse, and if you're already married, regardless of what the connection that you have or how close you are, there will be a point up to a certain amount of time where, if it's not disclosed, then they will, see the cracks and they will see the differences. And I think that, when you're not feeding yourself and you're not in a particular way, and it does change eventually as humans, as much as we want to hide things, when you're living in close proximity with people, and even if you just see them in the morning and the night, thinking that, it's just conversations, it's energy, vibration, frequency, all of that exists within us. There is always a gut feeling that either you think I'm hiding it, but then, as humans, you'll have that maybe guilt, even if you're hiding it, it's a subconscious level or subconscious level, it will exist. So I think the sooner that you're open and honest about, your struggles, if you are with a partner, and regardless of whether they want to share that journey with you, to speak to somebody and whatever, but do the research, because a lot of it we're listening to today's society, which is, a political agenda really. But when you look at the science behind it, that there is, fluidity where, as much as you can have same-sex attraction, you can actually switch to the other side, but that's not even shown much in research, even though research has it all. Right. And I'm not saying it from me. There are clinical psychologists that have come from the American Psychology Association, they're from Harvard, from, all these top, clinicians and doctors and PhDs that have got research, and I've got all of it here. And, whenever anyone wants to reach out to me, I've got the information to show that, this can be changed within a human, and it is not just biological. There's no research around that. It's very much, environmental factors, whether they had too much affection or none at all, whether they had trauma, whether they had their abuse. So they need to obviously understand where it's coming from. And it can actually be something that maybe if it comes from maybe science and research and psychology, then the partner will not maybe feel so and take it so personal. So I think instead of even just thinking about, should I tell, should I not tell, we need to do the research as well. We need to understand the science behind it so that we can understand ourselves. Just like if you go into any relationship, I actually do say we should have premarital coaching or counseling, and it's not available widely, and not everyone even is qualified for it. It's the same thing, because that's when it's like, oh, know yourself. How do you know yourself? You don't know. We've been conditioned, we've been institutionalized. There's psychology, that talks about the filters that we create over the years, whether it's from, faith, religion, whatever, and some serves us and some doesn't. And it's the same thing when it comes to this. We have to be open about, even there's the certain changes and stages that we go through life when we're living with somebody, whether you call it a midlife crisis or some sort of change biologically or hormones in the body that can have an effect on an individual to either, make them feel in a particular way. So they need to obviously, make sure that their partner, if they are still married, regardless of how that relationship is, that it's only fair to make them aware, because I just know things that are kept untold just build up. And you might think, oh, I'm going to take the knock. Well, you rather take that slight wind instead of taking a tsunami. That's how I look at it, because eventually when it builds up, it just becomes a whirlwind. And we're very, very scared to have uncomfortable conversations. That's why lies exist, untruthfulness has, and you think you're protecting the other, but actually you're just trying to protect yourself because you're not geared up to have these honest, open, uncomfortable conversations. And when you understand that in yourself and be bold and blunt and take whatever that comes with it and own it. And that's why it's so important when they talk about self-awareness, is you building a character within yourself. So you're not afraid of that partner that you've lived with for years, right? And you're not going to be afraid. And that's when you can actually do the work. But you see, we don't look at it like that. We're just thinking that, we're just walking on eggshells the whole time, and then we'll blame the other person, and then this happens and that happens. And I deal with these kind of relationships, and I'm like, seriously, we need to get ourselves together. Let's just own it. What's the worst that can happen? Seriously. And the worst only happens when it's delayed, when it's, comes to the point when you're actually, trying to avoid certain things and keep putting things off. And I know people say, well, you're strong, you can handle it. Well, build yourself up to it. Because you know what, in life, you've got to take the knocks and you've got to move on from it, and you've got to do the work. And it's only going to happen when you build that strength. So if you're living with someone and when you want to do certain things, you go for it. But when it comes to serious things, we are literally, building these kind of barriers, which is only going to knock us down in the future. So I really do, think in that, again, particular scenario, when you're married and you're changing in your ways, whether you like your partner, you don't feel attracted to them, you're looking somewhere else, whether it's, another gender or the same gender, these things need to be spoken about. These things need to be had, because most of these families, they have children, they have families, or even just the other partner. It's just not fair, right? And then they get themselves into such dire situations, which if you took the proper precautions from the beginning and the proper resolutions, then even those situations can actually, whether it ends or doesn't end, or you're working towards it, can be a lot less harsh, because then they become enemies, then they become, resentfulness and hate, and there's a lot of pain unnecessarily. And that's what, you find. Why is it coming from that? It's because it's not dealt with from the beginning in a way which is an adult responsible, who's going to say, you know what, yeah, I'm right, I'm wrong, or whatever it is that you think I am, but let's talk, real talk, difficult talk, uncomfortable talk, but let's talk.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you said, it's the strength of the relationship which is so important. And no matter what is being shared, that is testing your resilience in that relationship, and what you can go through, and how honest, transparent, congruent you are, because your spouse is supposed to be someone who's there for you, who's supporting you, who's by your side. And if you're unable to fully appreciate that support or access that support, then that can be quite isolating. I would argue it's the same before marriage. So, you want to test the strength of that relationship. And, I tell clients that I almost see it as a litmus test, to say, if I get married and then later on, they say, you know what, this is something I can't handle, then it's perhaps too late at that point. There's other scenarios when the spouse doesn't even know what they have, so they couldn't have possibly told them before marriage, right? So I have a lot of cases where people are like, oh, I didn't even know what to call this, so they're not in that, as you said, they're not in that journey of actually even being honest to themselves or being aware of what's happening within themselves. So they couldn't possibly have done that,
I think in that scenario, it's more about fear and not having the right terminology. And also, I'm sorry, with today's day and age, people are definitely aware. They either just don't want to rock the boat. I'll be honest, because you know me, I'm really direct. And a lot of people, even before marriage, like, I'm not going to question, I'm not going to do this. They might run away. I'm like, let them run away. Might as well do it from the beginning, right? But they're so scared of losing that relationship, or just want to like tie the knot, tie them down, so that when they tie them down, they think that they will change eventually, or they themselves will change eventually. And that's all wrong. That's really all wrong. I think we're so much caught up in this idea of, relationships and having to want it, be it whether it's from faith, whether it's this, yes, it's half your deen, but do it in the right way. Don't pretend. Don't, sort of mislead yourself and somebody else, because that's just really not fair. And it's not going to really end up well for you or somebody else, whether it's, months or years to come later. And I think people need to understand, what does it mean? Why do you even want a relationship? Is it just to satisfy your family, just society? Is it just there because, at the end of the day, it looks good, and you don't want to raise this point as well when you're married because it's going to rock the boat? Well, you know what, you're already got all these holes in it. Okay, it's gonna sink eventually, but if you actually got one or two, you can actually fix it at the beginning, more likely than when you're like gonna be like like the Titanic and there's no hope. So
absolutely. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Having a firm foundation of trust, that if it's going to be rocky, we're going to survive that because we have that trust within each other. And a lot of spouses say, they come back and they say, it wasn't the same-sex attraction, it wasn't the gender identity, it wasn't maybe even the sexual acting out. It was the fact that you didn't consider me worthy to tell me this,
yes.
So sometimes it isn't about the issue, it's about the fact that we've not been vulnerable, we've not been that, because when people always say, oh, what if they expose me, right? So often the question comes back is, right, I can be emotionally vulnerable, but what if my spouse chooses to expose me? How would you respond to that?
I think that is a fair question to be. That's why I said at the beginning, it's not just about saying, oh, I need to be honest. You need to understand the family dynamics, because if you're going to share with that spouse, is it going to be kept secret? Because a lot of the times it is quite detrimental and dangerous. We have to be open, right? We are living in societies and communities nowadays, even in the West, where it is very much so not tolerated. Okay, and it can be detrimental to that person. That's why I started at the beginning saying, do you know the outcome, to the very, limits? Not doesn't a stretch to your spouse, but even beyond, if they're going to say it to their, friend or family member, and then how is that going to impact you? And would you be able to come back from that? And are you strong enough to handle even worst case scenarios? So I very much had that in my mind when I knew that was, coming across. I'm glad you kind of clarified what I meant there, because it is a very important point. We have to be realistic. Sometimes you have to be in hiding to a certain extent, because you know that at the end of the day, this is your life. This is a threat, maybe not to that extreme, but the fact that, you might be tormented, you might be, bullied, you might be, judged. And, none of that is part of whether it's the English law or the Islamic law is acceptable and tolerated. Regardless of it being sin or not, you cannot do that to any human being. Let's just be very clear about that, right? So that's why we have these conversations. We have to be human to another human, regardless of what their choices are, regardless of their confusion, regardless of their choices, even if it goes against completely what I believe. And that's why even if you are a professional, you should be client-centered. And if you can't handle that, you do not impose your ways and your values on them. Even this whole idea of certain therapies that are going out there with certain names, that again is showing that they're going in a direction when actually the only way it's going to work is when the client chooses, right? And it's when you are qualified and trained enough to be able to open up those doors and, counter challenge and question, so that they can understand the different scenarios and outcomes. And then they decide and they choose for themselves whether to remain, whether to move forward, regardless of your own belief. So we have to be very, very clear and, and talk about this in this way, and even make it clear to the client, because even most of them come there thinking, oh, you're going to help me do it this way, and that's my goal. No, I will try my best, but my job is not to make those choices for you. I'm here to open up those doors, and like a car, I'm the side mirrors that you can't see, I'm the rearview mirror, I'm the the wing mirror, all of those. All right, I'm even your mirror to reflect back as to what you're saying, so you can think about it. That's what it is. So people don't understand therapy, and when they're young, they don't want their parents' advice. When they're older, they want everyone to tell them what to do. It doesn't work either way. You need to know, really, you need to study, you need to know. And you know what, even if you don't take a course on it, just go Google certain things and you'll find out about how things should work. And I think personal development is so essential for every human being, so that they can understand how life works. And then when they understand how it works and a little bit of psychology, then they'll understand themselves and the other person, and be a little bit emotionally intelligent. So you're not just only aware of yourself, but knowing that your decisions, choices, disclosure, non-disclosure affects another human being, especially if it's your potential spouse.
Absolutely. The goal is self-awareness rather than it being a solution or a direction that you're getting the client towards. Absolutely. So we've discussed before and after marriage, and we've discussed in terms of attractions. I want to move on to actual cheating. So we obviously have this reality. And I've got a few statistics, which, at least in the UK, so there was a survey done in 2014 by Slater and Gordon, and that was a survey of 2,175 married British, and that found that at least 1 in 5, so 20% said they have kept a major secret in their marriage. So another fact here from Office of National Statistics, that's 2018, so that's quite recent, that infidelity is the most common cited reason for divorce in the UK. Another survey by Global Investigations, which surveyed 2,000 people during COVID-19, again comes up with a similar number, that 1 in 5 admitted to having an affair. And we see this. So I have, kind of spouses as well, which will come and they'll say, there may be signs such as changes in intimacy, using their phone quite secretively, internet usage, changes in work or the routine, or changes in appearance or grooming of the spouse. And these are like telltales for them for cheating. So if you are a spouse and you have, or you are perhaps wondering what to do, would you gather the evidence, which is kind of required for it to be not suspicion? Because even religiously, we have this, don't suspect, don't have suspicion. But then again, we just saw the ayah in the Quran, which talks about a spouse not having that condition of 4 witnesses, right? If you know or have an inkling that your spouse is having an affair, where would you start?
Well, first of all, if you have to question any particular spouse or relationship, friendship, whatever, and especially your actual intimate romantic relationship, whether it's in the beginning, middle, or end, or whatever it is, or however long you've been there, then there's a problem. If you just have to question it in the first place. And usually, being in a particular way, and, we have gut feelings, we have certain things, and even with what you've highlighted about the changes, those are just very obvious reasons, fair enough. But a lot of the times we know way beforehand. We have this kind of sense within us, as in our souls, when we're with somebody, and, you know, because marriage is an institute, it's a sacred act, it's a religious as well as, you know, it's basically a communion between two people that gives a promise, and you're not giving a promise not just to each other, but you're giving it to God. So I feel when that contract is broken verbally or physically or in any way, then, you know, whichever party has been broken in that way, and if they've actually stepped out of that contract, then, you know, there definitely will be some sort of, you know, inclination, whether it's what you've said that highlights, you know, the suspicion, or even the fact that there's other reasons where the spouse starts to blame you so that they feel good about themselves and think that you're wrong, you're not doing this, you're not doing that, and whatever it is. And if you look at most of the statistics as well, where with cheating partners, they've got their own issues that they've had unhealed trauma, problems, decisions, and at a certain point in their lives, then it's actually come to surface. And a lot of times, you know, and I really always, and I've dealt with this topic many times before, where, you know, the person that's been cheated on, and the first thing, even women will talk, and yes, the statistics also say majority of the cheaters are men, even though women cheat, but that's just, you know, statistics out there. But now it's coming quite close to both. But yeah, it's like, even if you do say that it is my sort of like, you know, fault for him cheating, that's always the way. But no, the actual person who has cheated or committed that, they have the issue. They are the ones that have stepped out of their contract, their promise, their responsibility. It doesn't matter. Yes, everyone has some sort of responsibility and accountability, but we need to understand that they have the problem. And there's so many women that come distraught, or even society generally say, oh, maybe you didn't satisfy him. Maybe this, you know, there wasn't much sexual attraction there. No such thing. Okay, you get the most beautiful, even women in celebrity status, and has it all, and they get cheated on. So what were you telling me there then? What chance do we have? No, it's nothing to do with that. So we need to go into the core of the problem. It's not just about, you know, gathering that information. Again, if you did all the kind of work beforehand, yes, I know people change, but it's less likely when you have certain people that come from a certain caliber and they respect and have values and morals, and they have the fear, not just for society, but beyond something bigger and better for themselves. They don't go down that path. And if they ever did, you will know. And I don't see anything wrong, as much as we also quote from Quran and Ahadith. These are just one sections, but there's other sections. So you have to stand up for yourself, and you have to protect yourself. And this is your family, and you want to know the truth, then you have to gather information. You're not doing it in a manipulative way. You don't have to go secretly. You can outright even, you know, ask them. Right? Okay. But if nowadays, if you feel that's going to cause, you know, they're too smart and they're in a position where they're not going to do it, then yeah, get a private investigator or do your own research. Because, you know, if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out, where thankfully, hopefully it's not the truth. But majority of the time, like you said, it does actually turn out that it is the truth, that they are cheating, they are lying, right? Because people don't just make these things up, unless, of course, if it is because they've come from a paranoid past or mistrust and they haven't dealt themselves. But then those things are normally at the beginning, not in the middle or towards the fact that you've lived already normally, and then all of a sudden it just comes up. So from a psychological point of view, I mean, I just think that if someone cheats and you have an inclination, then you do need to address it. And you do need to do whatever it takes, even if it means that you go to seek therapy yourself first and ask them to do it, because the relationship obviously is not satisfying. Then that could even highlight, see how their reactions are then. They can only pretend for so long. They can only go on for so long, right? It's definitely something that I think couples like to avoid. A lot of people think that, you know, they can just brush it under the carpet, or a lot of women just live with that because they've put themselves in situations where they just feel that there's no other option and they shut up and put up. And I'm not saying that you need to stand up and, you know, end that relationship. Sometimes it can actually make it stronger, and you can work at it and you can build from it, and you can maybe highlight the issues that you've brushed under the carpet for so long and come together. So there's many ways of thinking about it, but definitely don't ignore it like a lot of people do, because in the end, it just builds resentment, it builds hate, and you will burst as well with that actual partner of yours, right? And you know what, it causes the stress, and the amount of stress and the amount of things that you have within your body that's going to cause you not just mental but physical pain, that in the end that partner is only going to go further and further away, and you're just going to think why, and it's just a scenario which is, I've seen such detrimental outcomes. So I will not leave this at all. If you have even a slight inclination, do it in a respectful way, do it in an adult way. We have 3 ego states: the adult, child, and parent ego state. So if you're going to address it, don't shout, don't scream, don't also parent like as if you know better. Do it, in a respectful, calm way. I think that's what we need to address as well. Instead of just making an accusation, be smart about it. Get some help if you don't know.
Absolutely. The adult ego state, it's almost like if you are having attractions outside of the marriage, an adult ego state might actually address those and say, hey, I know you wouldn't like to hear this, but I am having attractions outside the marriage. I don't know why this is happening, but I need to discuss this with you, and actually having your spouse to help you with that very difficult reality is perhaps the thing which would be helpful. But for so many of us, we think, gosh, we can't say that to our spouse. We can't be saying that we're having attractions outside, whereas in real life that's a very normal thing to happen.
Absolutely. And again, if you're acting upon it, then there's definitely situations where you're running away from yourself, you're lying to yourself, and even the person that's cheating, after a while, they become overwhelmed with it all. It's really, I actually feel sorry for the cheater when, to a certain extent, because they don't realize the kind of pressure they're putting on themselves by being in that way, to hold a double life, to pretend to be one person one day or 1 minute and then the next. And they're not sometimes, with partners that even know that they probably are married, or some women aren't okay with that, whatever way it is. So you're probably also hurting not just one family, but another, right? And these things always come out with you not winning. As much as you think you are, you do not win, right? And if you're going to hurt your own family, honestly, there is no success in that moving forward. So really think deep about that.
Absolutely. No, I think very well said. We're going to transition to Q&A in a short while. Is there anything else you wanted to discuss, Mr. Fahima, on this topic before we do transition to Q&A?
I think we need to really try and learn about our human mind and body. I think not just because I'm studying psychology and neuroscience, but I think that, when I went into the self-development world, a few years ago, it just opened up a sense of real understanding. The existential side of life is so crucial to know our meaning, our purpose, our why, so that we can reinforce values, we can reinforce boundaries, healthy boundaries. It's just for your own benefit, and relationships and couples are different, but, you need this even for your own relationships. Look at your own family members, people that you're difficult with, how you deal with them. Even look at that, when you're finding a spouse, and look at the, behind the scenes as to how these people are, and it will give you an inclination as to who they are. And even for yourself. I've had to deal with very, very difficult situations myself, and I've had to change even up till today. I'm constantly changing to, the main thing is not just being academic and being great at your job. It's managing to be with people, different types of people, and they will not change for you. You have to change and adjust constantly to know how to be with different people, to adjust and know how to be, either too close, too far, or keep a distance, a barrier, or whether it's work, whether it's, friendships, whether it's family that you can't get away from. All of this, we are not taught and we are not working on enough. And you think, oh, I'm just going to get into a relationship and that's going to make it all well for me. No, it's not. If you can't get it right at home, you're not going to get it right outside. And if you think you're going to also be okay in business, believe me, your relationships seep through your business as well. So really do work on yourself in order to have a very, very strong foundation to manage relationships, because you can be in a high-flying business, and if you don't know how to even be in a team and work and read different characters and know different ways of other people's thinking and thoughts and feelings, and knowing how to maneuver out that, then that's going to be your downfall as well. So I look at it as a skill in life, honestly, whether it's your parents, your children, your spouse, and your peers, your colleagues. This is the real challenge in life. But you can embrace it and enjoy it if you are on that path of learning. And I'm still learning myself.
Yeah, it's sometimes we think, sometimes we're unsuccessful in our inner circle and we think, oh, we can do well in the outer circle,
Yeah.
but we don't realize that actually the inner circle is a
Filters.
reflection
Mm-hmm.
on who we really are.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Yes. So with the Q&A, you have the option as well to raise your hand. You raise your hand, then you can ask by audio. Just be aware that your name will be shown, and this is live on Facebook. So if you choose not to do that and you want to question anonymously, you can do that with the Q&A button at the bottom of your window. Inshallah. There's a few questions, I think, as we were going, so I'm just going to address that. Oh, actually, someone's already addressed what IFTCC stands for. So thank you for that. We have a comment which says, as you were speaking, very good point from Fahima. If you are going to marry someone and have SSA, you have to be certain that you can give your all and that you are attractive. I suffered from SSA since a child. I got married thinking it would go away, but it was actually a really bad decision. You have to be honest and true to yourself. And I think that's thank you for whoever's posted that. And I think it does take a lot of awareness, and we do come from communities which almost put marriage as the solution. SSA.
Yes. And it's not.
Yeah. And it's so many times we get that, oh, but the verse says, and the daughters are purer for you. And it's like, yes, they are pure for you, but are you ready to take that? Because that's a relationship. And also in that story is different because that for a lot of, well, maybe all of them, they're already married, right? And they were going beyond that. They weren't in the state of they weren't married and they were having these attractions. But I don't know what your experience is around the shame that perhaps exists in our communities to just be quiet and get married.
Oh, there's a lot of shame. There's a lot of cultural traditions, even for divorce. I've got, families that come to me, women that come to me saying, my parents said, no, you can't get divorced because the other one's divorced. So go back to your abusive husband. So this happens in communities, unfortunately. So definitely with something like this, it's all about, keeping it all hush hush. And I don't know where the religion comes into it with that. I wish I could tell these communities seriously, like, wake up. This is a human being. This is, something that you need to consider, that, regardless of how other people think, but we live by what other people think, even though those people are just laughing or having their own choices and they have their own problems in their own households. Every family, every home has their own challenges, right? We need to understand that. And each one will be given some challenge, whether it's, the fact that you are in a Muslim community or a Christian or a Jew, and you actually have got same-sex attraction, whether it is health, whether it's, not enough wealth, whether it's, whatever it may be. So we need to be a little bit more open as well, because I think, we put out these quotes of what the Quran says and that Hadith says, and that's it. But, the story is much more behind that. And we're looking today at human beings that are now, walking away unnecessarily, when actually we should be, having more empathy and compassion. And regardless of, like I said, if there is a link or the similarities of, core beliefs. But at the same time, again, life is a struggle and a challenge. And it's all there for us to learn and to grow and support each other. Just like if someone takes off the hijab, it's so many things that we have, this opinion about, and we all become like these polices when they don't realize that actually you are drawing people away further, and you are actually making them, feel even worse than what they do feel. There's no, like, they want to be religious and tell you the rules, yet the approach and the language, is all lacking. And that, first and foremost, that akhlaq, the etiquette, is gone. But no, you can have a go at somebody publicly, say it on Facebook, call them out, and, deem them, and, all of these things. It's so wrong. And I get it myself all the time. And luckily I've got, this huge, amazing mindset that I have tried to build, where you just cannot knock me down when it comes to that, because I do have my core beliefs on my faith very strong. And all I'll do is address it as another topic. But there are so many individuals out there that get the criticism and get the judgment so unfairly, right? Even if they know the rules. It's not like as if, they are doing certain things deliberately to hurt and harm you. So families, family, the bond, the household is really crumbling, not because of just relationships, it's because of this warped idea of, how things should be, because they want to put a facade, they want to keep up appearances, and it really does not help your children. And you are hurting the future and the generation, and you are going to be accountable for it too. So remember that. And I hope this message reaches people more than even the question of, should I not say. Let's be human to other humans first. And I think that's when we can really, be successful in moving forward in life.
Absolutely, yeah. And as you've been speaking, one of the cases which kind of comes to mind is we have some marriages which people come to me and they're called convenience marriages, right?
Oh, yeah.
So it's like, okay, because I'm so ashamed to talk about my sexuality, and this is so big in our community, only another person who is going through exactly what I'm going through, and they're of the opposite sex, is going to understand, and probably they're going through what I'm going through as well. So if we marry together and we just do our own thing, but we're just married, right? That's going to solve it. I don't know if you've come across that.
I haven't come across that specifically. What I have come across is obviously marriage of convenience when it comes to choosing someone from another faith. And again, it says, yes, invite them into the faith. It's so nice. And I'm like, well, that's still dangerous. At the end of the day, you're going to be like, yeah, you show them, how lovely community is and getting together is. But at the same time, at the end of the day, when you go a few months down the line and there's certain things that has to be obligatory and that person is not aware, then, what happens then? Do you understand? So that person needs to know their faith very well if they're a revert, and then marry you, not just for the fact of marriage of convenience and just say, yeah, I'm converting. Again, I don't trust that. I don't feel that's enough. If you really come from faith, then you want someone who is strong to choose you, because not just because of your faith, but to choose the faith for themselves, so that in worst case scenario, for example, if there was even a split, your children are going to go and follow their father or their mother who is not from the faith in the same faith, because that marriage is going to be built upon something which is genuine, not just for the sake of marriage. You're going to choose a faith. And it's the same thing with the same sex. We do have another comment.
Yes, so we have a question. The first part of that question is saying, is it haram, prohibited to hide your sexuality from your spouse if you have SSA? So I guess the haram part would probably be according to your
scholar.
For the second part, which I was saying, what are some of the practical ways to develop attraction to females? I'm guessing it's obviously a male who's asking that question.
I think when you understand some of the research of same-sex attraction and how it develops, and you understand where did your triggers come from, because a lot of it, like I said at the beginning, it does come from environmental factors. And that is the research. And then you can maybe work with therapists to find out where yours has come from. And sometimes, a lot of the times, one example is that there's a lack of need because there was an absent father, or there was a very over-controlling mother that demeaned a father, so that you looked for that in another male, and that became something which was sexual. So you got to figure out what was that. And maybe it could come from the other man that you think it was. But if another woman gave you that need, because that's the need that you've identified that is either missing or you feel that you need it, and if that woman can give it to you, then that's what it's about. It's not just about, oh, you know, I just am attracted to somebody. We have to understand it comes from these past sort of like, you know, experiences that you've actually developed. Even you might not remember, you might even have to speak to your siblings, because a lot of it happens when you're in childhood, even from a lot of the things that you may have experienced or been associated with from a young age. And that's what got you into, you know, being attracted to the same sex. And that's what the research says, right? I've got a lot of statistics and research to show that these, and people that have, you know, spoken about how it developed from the research as well, as to where that attraction came from. So when you understand that first and what was your need, then it's not even about the person being the same gender as you. It's about you having a need which you can transfer to find it in the opposite sex as well. So that's what I'm trying to say. So it's not about just you stop feeling. It's like, for example, let me give you an example, because I just listened to it this morning. When, for example, if they have a brother that was, you know, an older brother that kept, you know, making fun of the younger one and saying, you know, you're too sensitive, you cry, and this, that, and the other. And some, you know, boys are like that, and they will develop a dislike for the brother, but they will maybe admire another man, for example, who had those qualities that they didn't have. Right. So that's how sometimes it can develop into that way. So if you were to identify what was your story, and then you will now not maybe be attracted to that man because that's how you felt and made to feel. You might just, you know, admire them just for being in a particular way, and you can develop being in that particular way. So there's so much, again, like I said, PhD research out there from professors and students. And I've got a wonderful link, which I will share to you, Ali, as well, which explains this very well. And maybe you can pass on to whoever's listening. And then that will really highlight how you can, I'm not saying you need to change, but I'm saying you need to understand yourself, whether you remain the same or you go, you know, to the same or the opposite gender. That would be on your sort of like, you know, level of growth or development or whatever it may be. Because at the end of the day, we have to be careful of, obviously, of how we speak. We have to follow the law of the land over here, regardless of our faith. And but I'm not afraid to speak about what the research says, even if the politicians and agendas are out there to block that. So that's what I'm not afraid to speak about. So when I'm saying something, it's coming from the research, from science, right? It's just that it's not being, you know, basically put out there in the media as much, and it's being really downplayed. So there is an agenda. So that's why we may not be aware of it. So I'm going to send you that link, and inshallah, that should help you with your question as well.
Thank you, and we'll definitely spread that link on our channel. We have a comment here saying, Jazakallah for this discussion, Jazakallah for joining and engaging in this. We have another comment here, which is quite big. So this is from Tahar. He's saying, thanks a lot for everything. Me personally, I really want to marry, and I know that I have to be fully ready for it. At this time, I'm willed, or I've willed to tell my future spouse about my SSA because I want to be fully open, and I do not consider my SSA a real obstacle for a healthy marriage. But still, I think that it's better that she knows about it so we can build the relationship together. I'm willing to have intimacy with my future wife, and I think her knowing my SSA will ease up the process of getting intimate. I would tell her everything about my struggles and that I had never had a single relationship, nor having done any zina. Alhamdulillah, for me, SSA exists, but I don't intend at all to live it out, inshallah. Of course, my great fear is that she will not understand and that she could tell everybody about my secret, since not even my parents know about my SSA, and I don't really want them to know. So we did touch on this, didn't we, where the brother here has lovely intentions of being completely honest and clear in the marriage, but there is this fear, isn't it, that we discussed that you need to weigh out what the risk is in that.
Just also on that note, I think even if you have fear, just know that, you know, people are people and they can't really touch you really. And that fear you also need to face and overcome. As much as you want to keep it secret, and it should be kept secret, and you should maybe have a conversation to begin with to say to your potential spouse that, you know, I do, regardless of your outcome of how you feel, that you keep this private and confidential. But if that secret is broken, then again, you got to understand, you got to trust that process too. Because as much as we get so fixated on what we want to be in our lives, whether it's keep it a secret or not, sometimes it happens only for us. I think life happens for us. And if you feel very strongly, because you seem to be quite, you know, sincere about how you are, how you feel, quite confident as you are, then you've got to take that confidence and sincerity to that, whatever the outcome is, even though you've taken all the precautions to say, do not expose me, whatever you feel. But if it has to happen in that way, don't feel defeated. That's the other thing. And I think that's how we become resilient and overcome challenges, is when we also accept worst case scenarios, knowing we can overcome it. And as we know, we're not given anything that we cannot handle. I think it's that fear that overcomes the fact that we need to realize, let it go. We, you know, you speak, not to say you should be, you know, sort of like just disregarding the fact that it should be secret. If you want to keep it, it should be. But if it does get open because that person cannot be trusted, again, you get to know that person, and you have to deal with certain situations in your life that's only going to be for you. Life happens for us in every way. Okay. So I do pray that hopefully it works out for you and you do get the good response and the compassion and the empathy. But again, if you don't, I honestly believe that that's just your path and we've got to accept it.
Absolutely, you know, and as you say, life happens, things kind of happen, and sometimes we understand the fear might be coming from, you know, kind of a place where it might be irrational, because it may be that your spouse as well is going to trust you and they're going to maintain that boundary as well. And a lot of people say, well, how do you kind of see when that point is in the relationship? And, you know, for me, because I have this question a lot, they're like, okay, Ali, I want to tell them, but I'm not sure when I'm supposed to tell them. And I know from my own personal experience that it was when my spouse, which is now, started to talk about her insecurities, her vulnerabilities, things that she wouldn't tell anybody else, that I knew that was the moment to then share mine. Because naturally, if someone opens up to you and shares a lot, it's quite natural to the other person to also share, because they feel like, wow, I can't believe you've trusted me with this information. I'm going to reciprocate, especially if it's a potential spouse, to say, you know, thank you for telling me. And a lot of the times we feel like if we tell somebody our secret or its vulnerability, that they're going to see us lower, or they're going to see that we're not as, you know, kind of there, but actually it's a strength, and a lot of people see that as a strength.
Absolutely. Yeah, when you're showing vulnerability, I mean, that word itself might mean sort of like, you showing weakness, but actually you're right. It actually shows strength. It takes a lot to even make the first step to seek out help or even say it out loud to yourself, let alone to somebody else. 100%. And even it's you just also sharing with someone when you know it's right is when you can't get it out of your mind. And just like how you would write it down in a diary or a journal, and it does relieve some of the overwhelmness or the anxiousness, even fear sometimes, is when you constantly think about something and you say it. Eventually it does relieve the body from that sort of strain. So that's the other indicator, as when you know it's the right time, and it's never going to be realistically the right time. But if it's affecting your health, and if it's affecting your sleep, and if it's affecting your mind, and if it's interrupting your daily routine as well, then obviously the longer you keep certain things like that, then it's only going to escalate into things that is not really good for you. So that's the other indicator about time.
Absolutely, yeah. So there's not see if there's any more questions. Is there we've talked about quite a lot on this session on a variety of things, and I think it's true that there isn't one answer for this question, and it's so true, how you said it's less about should I tell, not I tell. It's about who am I and where am I in my awareness, where am I in my growth, and less so. And I think you're completely right that a lot of people, especially in the community, see coaching or therapy as advice giving, right? You need to go to the therapist, they'll fix you, right? Or they'll tell you what you're supposed to be doing. Or they'll tell you, oh, this is the halal and this is the haram and this is what you're supposed to be doing. And, I love what you said about the mirrors, the rear view mirror, and, kind of almost like that Johari window of things that we don't know, which are back there, and we don't quite know it's there. And sometimes life, a lot of the times life isn't black and white. There's so much gray, right? There's a lot of gray in situations, and even our faith talks about values. It concentrates on values of being honest, of being congruent, being trustworthy, having that, because different situations will call for different actions. But if we're living a life according to values, then we know, okay, I want, like that brother, I want to be honest, but actually, is the honesty going to detriment, other things, which, we have even the Islamic concept of enjoining the good and forbidding the evil. But we talked about hijab, for example. If you are going to force someone with that enjoining the good, is that really going to be something which is going to be good in the long term? And it's about kind of seeing things not as black and white, but seeing things as the long-term aspect of what we're doing, rather than it being, oh, this was the right thing to do at that time.
No, absolutely. I really do love everything that you've said, and we've echoed it a lot. And I think we also need to understand in life, we are here as a test. We always want things comfortable and easy, but actually the real growth and the real understanding and development of life is when things do get tough. We need to get more and more used to it. That's what I've learned over the last few years, that, I'm willing to ride that wave. And sometimes it might be quite tough and quite high, but if it's meant for me, because that's what's going to give me that growth and satisfaction and fulfillment, then that's what I need to ride. And sometimes the sea's going to be smooth and you're going to be okay, but life's a roller coaster, and a lot of us want it to go smoothly. But actually, as human beings, if it even goes smoothly, then we get bored, then we get really like What's the next big thing? So, you can never really satisfy, but if you understand it, then you'll be willing to accept these kind of things. And this is part of life. So honestly, I just hope that whoever's struggling and whoever's feeling whatever, it's not just you. We all have our struggles. And this is one of the very, very challenging ones. It's not easy to talk about. We do need to seek more research advice and understanding about the whole topic itself, and don't just listen to just the general social media and general news about this, because when you go into real studies and science into it, you will really get a real understanding about how this all works, and that can also alleviate that we are able to change, we are able to move back and forth, and we have got a choice to do that. So even if you felt in that way and everyone says, well, I'm born that way and I can never change, science doesn't say that's true at all. So that can also help you with your transition if you are feeling that you are moving from a homosexual to a heterosexual relationship, so you can ensure with research to your partner as well. Don't just come just from feelings and emotions. Let's do the real research so that we can actually know the truth as to how our bodies and minds actually work. And that can also bring about the confidence that you can go on this journey.
Absolutely. Well, I know people will be asking for more questions. How is the best way to get hold of you, Fahima, if there's some people who want to ask more questions?
Well, I'm on every single social media platform you can think of. You can even Google my name, but to be fair, like my website has my email and all of that in there. So coachfm.com is probably the best way to get all my sort of details and information. So email is probably the best way. And I do respond quite, within 24 hours, 48 hours, depending if you're from abroad, because I do get clients from abroad, depending on the time difference. Even if it's just to tell you my fees or just to give you some direction, I have a network of people that I am connected to. So even if I can't help you, I can direct you. I'm quite happy to say, you know what, this is an area I know someone better than me, but I'm always willing to lend a hand. So, hopefully, God willing, that if you do need anything, I'm always going to be giving you some sort of, assistance in, whether it's from myself personally or anyone else.
Absolutely. And I reiterate, I can personally vouch for Fahima and the help that she's given us, and, kind of like the support with this topic, bringing it to, more of the Muslims to kind of talk about, to address this. And the fantastic work, if you follow her on social media, like mashallah, there's so much which is always seeing things, developments, different talk shows, and always touching the controversial topics. And you do that, mashallah, so well. And may Allah support you, may Allah give you more barakah, may He strengthen your efforts, inshallah, for the work that you are doing for the whole Muslim Ummah on this very, very important topic. And as you would be seeing today, those who are listening, she isn't afraid to say the truth. She isn't afraid to kind of say, look, this is what the science is, this is what the research is showing. And even if we have a very popular narrative, it's always okay to say, to be critical and to look at the science and to look at what the numbers and what the research is actually saying. And we will definitely share the link that Sister Fahima has sent us. Any closing remarks, Sister Fahima, before we close?
Just want to say thank you for inviting me and everybody that actually watched the actual live and even afterwards. And just to say, honestly, be kind to yourself, take care of yourself, and there's nothing wrong in that. And if you're going through struggles, don't be afraid to reach out to a professional. It's really, really going to be vital. I use it myself, even being a professional myself. So there's many other professionals. So, just literally take care. Your well-being is the most important investment that you can make for yourself. So, do spend time on that and work on that constantly.
Thank you so much, Sister Fahima, and Jazakallah khair for all of your efforts. And inshallah, for next webinar, we will have the topic of Islam and gender identity. And inshallah, we'll discuss that. Till then, thank you, everyone. Assalamu alaikum.
Bye.